Hello everyone. So today let's talk about parallel realities. If you put parallel realities into YouTube, you'll find there's lots of people got lots to say about this. So now is time for the shamanic perspective on parallel realities. So here's the very first thing you need to grab hold of, and it's perhaps the hardest thing for some, which is that we have all been brought up to believe that linear time is a reality. And what all shamans know is it's an illusion. And this is the really big breakthrough. And the way a lot of people reach this is through working with plant medicines. There's lots of other ways too, out of body, many different ways that take people out of the ordinary reality. They help us to realize that time is an illusion, and that the past, the present and the future, as we've been taught to believe, they just don't exist. So I woke up this morning and I had a feeling in my throat and it felt sore. And as soon as that happened, some memories started to kick in about sore throat equals a certain kind of an illness. And I started to think more memories of the past, things I could remember about having been ill before. And the next thing I knew, I was starting to get myself on a track. And if I'd carried on that track, I'd have ended up taking the day off, chilling in front of the TV, whatever. And at a certain point this morning I thought, no, let's choose a different parallel reality. Because here's the really obvious thing. Parallel realities in a sense is all a scam, because it's nothing very special and magical in a way, because every single moment that we have, we are here in the now. And right here in the now, I could choose to go and watch Full Metal Alchemist on Netflix, or I could get my string out and I could burn a bit more string and carry on making a yurt. It's up to me. I've got that choice because I happen to have the wood in the house and the string which I require, and my bits of tools, equipment, and my precious little lighter, and I can turn these sticks into a yurt. That's great. Point is, we've always got that choice in the moment. It's our pivot point, the here and now. So let's go deeper into this subject of parallel realities. It goes back, in a sense, all the way back, 40,000 years, 100,000 years. Shamans have always known that humans have got the ability to choose which reality we inhabit. And the lovely example I'm drawn to straight away is in a New World on the east coast of the United States of America, which of course was not called that, it was called Turtle Island at that time. A load of indigenous people were standing on the beach, and one of them was a shaman and all the rest were not. And the shaman looked out to sea and he pointed, he said, "Look at that," and they all went, "Huh?" They just saw the water and the sky. They didn't see anything else. The shaman could see that there were 3 sailing ships, far larger than any ships that Native American people at that time possessed. So he was seeing something way outside of ordinary 3D reality for Native Americans. But he was a shaman, he was used to travelling in the world, so he knew that what he was seeing was actually coming towards them. And it was the first white dudes from Europe. So the reason I'm introducing you to that idea is that when you're really stuck in the 3D, you can't see any other possibilities. As soon as you break out of 3D, for even the shortest length of time, you know that other things are possible. So as someone who takes a journey with mushrooms and they're experiencing the 3D reality realms, and suddenly the next thing they know, they're perceiving something completely different. And that is a possibility for a breakthrough. So, because time doesn't exist, this is why shamans can work with their clients, and the client can come and say, "I've got this problem." And the problem is always that the client has got an old story about themselves and their lives, which they believe to such an extent it's become sacrosanct. It's become a mindset. And so they've been telling that story to themselves maybe for years. So I was telling myself this story about my throat feeling a little sore this morning, And I could have carried on down that track and ended up with a full-blown infection and just not capable of doing anything. But I could make the choice of leaping out of that reality and choose a different track, which is the one I'm now on, which is making yurts and making a film. It's so cool. So let's get even further into this subject, because we've been taught that we can't change the past. We've been sold a lie. All shamans, when they work for their clients, they go into the client's past and they create a new story, a story of the client being the hero, the story of redemption, the story of healing, the story of new possibilities. And when the client takes that story on fully, that's been created for them, they're suddenly bumped off the old track and onto a new track. And that new parallel reality includes the fact they are no longer suffering from that problem, whatever it might have been. Maybe a fear of water, maybe a disability, maybe depression, maybe some severe trauma. Whatever it is, they've been bumped off the one track and they're on this other track now. So I want to give you an example of just how amazing this is. So I'd done my 2 years of training and I was going to Wales and I was driving to visit someone I'd met once at a camp, and she invited me to get to know me a bit more. Thank you very much. So there I am driving through Wales, and now Wales is wet pretty much all times of the year. It was autumn, it was wet, that's not surprising. Now there's a phenomenon that luckily, hopefully you've never experienced as a driver if you drive a vehicle. And that is, what can happen is if the water on the roads, there is so much of it and it can't drain away fast enough, what happens is you get a very thin film of water on the road surface. And this happened to me. Now Wales, the roads are wet, but they're very good quality. I'm so pleased about that. They really go to trouble to make their roads in good repair, generally speaking. So this road, it's going along the hillsides and the mountains, and of course it's full of bends. Bends every few yards, bends, bends, bends. So I'm coming around one of an infinity of bends, and suddenly the car wheels rise up off the tarmac onto this incredibly thin film of water. Not good news for me or the car. So I'm aquaplaning, and because I'm aquaplaning, thank goodness I'm aware of this phenomenon before it happens, so I know that there's nothing I can do in terms of braking that's going to make any difference. And in fact I realise I'm in the presence of mystery, because actually about 30 feet in front of me is a rock face, and it's many times the height of the car. I don't know how high it is, but it's a tall rock face, and my car is barrelling towards its rock face 35 miles an hour. And I'm off the road, I'm onto the grass, it may be 10 yards away, 5 yards away, I'm heading towards that rock face. And I know there's nothing I can do with my 3D reality. So what happens, because the situation is so severe and so extreme, and because I've been trained to be a shaman, what I do is I step out of that reality, which ends up in the car being destroyed, and probably me, 35 miles an hour, rock face, smack, be inevitable. So the next thing I know, the car has turned 180 degrees, it's now facing away from the rock face, and it's now going considerably slow, and it's actually moving towards the very edge of the road. It goes off the grass, and the two front wheels are just touching the edge of the road, and then the car stops dead, just like that, as if some force from on high had just applied some magical brakes. And there I am, completely unharmed, sitting in my car, completely undamaged, wheels just touching the edge of the road. And I know that's logically impossible. There isn't any way that could actually happen. And yet it did. And the question you might ask, of course, is an obvious one. Were there any witnesses? No, I was on my own. So here's another one for which I do have a witness. And there's a film all about it. You'll find it on my back catalogue if you have a look on UT Shaman. I'm with my good friend Neil, who is also a shaman, and we are in the Atlantic Ocean in Portugal. We've only got into the water as far as just above our knees at this point, and it's a lively ocean. There's lots of waves, and the waves are pretty big, and we can feel a bit of a current pulling, and the next thing we know, the water's just above our knees, we are pulled right out to sea, and it happens within less than a second. 1 second, there we are up to our knees, the next second up to our necks, and swimming to keep afloat. A witness. And what happens is we can see that the shore is moving further away, further away, further away, quickly, rapidly further away. And in that moment, swimming, treading water, keeping ourselves afloat, the old waves crashing over us, of course there's a moment of fear. And then, just the same as when I was hurtling towards the rock face, there's the moment of total let go and accepting everything as it is. And then, whoop, out of that reality into the next parallel reality. And in the next parallel reality, this mysterious force, which is the ocean, chooses to simply reverse the current and send us back in. And by the time the water is so low it reaches to the point of our knees, we power our way out of that water as quickly as we possibly can. And if you stop to think about things in your life in the past, start to talk to other people about this, you'll find that this is not so uncommon as you might assume at first. In fact, you'll find this is a remarkably common phenomenon, the ability for a person to shift from one parallel reality track to another. Now that's all very well, but wouldn't it be nice to be a bit more organised about this? It would, wouldn't it? So this is my clue for you. We all inhabit a certain level of consciousness, and our power is in the now. Now, inhabiting that level of consciousness, here's something you can do. It's so simple. Simply assume that you are operating from a higher level of consciousness than you're normally aware of. As soon as you make that assumption, indeed it is so. And in that higher level of consciousness, you can then take another choice. And that's what happened to me this morning, because I was feeling exhausted, lying in bed, and my throat felt like it was sore. And I had this past series of memories slotting into place, putting me onto a reality track, which would have ended up with me being ill. And all I did is I made the assumption that I'm having a higher level of consciousness. And in that higher level of consciousness, I remember that what I wanted to do today was to make a yurt. I love making yurts. It's really satisfying. It's something I do with my hands. It's physical. At the end of the work, you've got something to show for it. So it's like, yeah, I'll get out of bed. I'll go and finish making that yurt. And so I did. So the big first step is to realize that time linear is an illusion. It simply doesn't exist, but it's a very pervasive illusion. And one of the ways you can realize how illusory time is by stepping fully into presence, being in the present moment, and to realize you've got choices, far more choices than we might realize. And one of the ways that will help you to explore parallel realities is to let go of routines. If your life is a series of routines, then that would mean that you'd wake up and you would do this, then you'd do that, then you'd do that, then you'd do that. You've got no power because you're stuck in routines. Routines help to imprison you in 3D, and they help to limit your choices, because after I've done this, I always do that. Well, because I've always done it, I'll always carry on doing it. No. If you have a particular set of steps that you take, the best thing you can do is to break that cycle of events. If you normally get up and have a shower first thing in the morning, get up in the morning and do something else. And then if you want to have a shower, have it a bit later. So when you break up these patterns, you allow more possibility in. And when you're feeling daring enough to say, I'm just going to get up, I'll just get dressed, I'll just go outside and I'll see what happens, then you've got a lot more possibility for yourself in your life. So be willing to break your routines, be willing to assume a higher level of consciousness than you're normally familiar with, and be willing to be aware that you can be the best that you can be, and that any amount of movement that you can see in yourself, if you can say, well, 5 years ago I was like this and now look what I can do. If there's any of this going on in your life, this is all feeding the new thought form about new possibilities for yourself and your life. And that's what parallel realities means. It means to be able to jump off one track onto another track, onto another track, onto another track, and to go forward and to go into experiences that 5 years ago you couldn't even have imagined. So I'll give you my favourite example. I went to Glastonbury Festival and I saw my first yurts a long time ago, and I thought, I could never do that. And then one day, a couple of years later, I challenged myself on that, and I thought, no, this time I'm going to go to Glastonbury Festival, I'm going to go around with a tape measure and a piece of paper, and I'm going to write down all the measurements of the yurts that I can find if the people would allow me to do so. And really look at them and study them, and I did look at and study yurts and wrote down measurements and dimensions. And eventually I had enough information that I realised I could make a yurt too, and so I started to make yurts. I jumped into another parallel reality, and I'm now inhabiting the parallel reality of having finished this yurt. Done.